The Texas Longhorns have punched their ticket to the College Football Playoff Quarterfinals as they take down the Clemson Tigers by a final score of 38-24 in Austin. We are here breaking down this football game. I am Chris Phillips. He is Cole Thompson. Again, guys, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast where you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. And, of course, this segment brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com, promo code SECU at sign-up to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 or more lineup. That's prizepicks.com, promo code SECU to get that $50 bonus today. In the first ever college football playoff football game featuring an SEC team in the new 12-team college football playoff, I might add, the Texas Longhorns take down Clemson 38-24 to officially punch their ticket to the quarterfinals as they will take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. We break down this game, react to this one as, again, Quinn Ewers and company get the big 14-point win over Cade Klubnik and the Tigers. I am Chris Phillips. Joining me to help break down this game, my good friend Cole Thompson and a fellow Texan who watched this one. Cole, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time and excited to talk this game with you as the Texas Longhorns are officially headed to the quarterfinals.
I want everyone to just take a deep breath for a minute. Everyone breathe in. Say it with me. Thank you, Dabo. Thank you, Clemson. Thank you for actually giving us a game that we can talk about in such an at least prominent demeanor, because this was an overall balanced performance from both sides. There was a lot of highs. There was a lot of lows. Yes, you can go ahead and pinpoint what are the faults when it comes to Texas. What are the faults when it comes to Clemson? You can talk about the growth and maturity that we saw from Cade Klubnik moving forward and this young wide receiver core that is only going to get better in the ACC and could be a threat in 2025. But after the snooze fest and all of the gripe and all of the bantering and all of the bickering from fans across the college football landscape of how bad the Indiana game was and how bad the Penn State game was, can we just appreciate that this was a game that we could talk about, that this is a game that we can actually break down, that this is one that we wanted to enjoy for the 12-team college football playoff? For all the people who are complaining about the 12-team playoff being boring, this is not the one to hold your hat on to. You saw highs, you saw lows, you saw growth, you saw a lot of different heartbreaks, you saw a roller coaster of emotions. I'm excited to break down this game. And more importantly, I'm excited about the title. Because here's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. As it says, run through Clemson. You can't stop the run of Texas. You're running back home with an L between your legs.
Cole, to your point, after the snoozers that opened up the college football playoff first round, the new 12-team college football playoff, certainly to your point, it was a welcome sight that we actually saw a competitive football game, at least at times. This one, of course, did get close. But it felt like, even after Clemson went up early 7-0, Texas, it still felt like the way they were running the football, the ground game, they were in control. And, Cole, I want to go there. That was the story of this game. Yeah. The way Texas ran the football, 292 rushing yards in the game. They outrushed Clemson 292-76. Ran the football for 6.1 yards per carry. And, Cole, it's the thing we've been talking about all season long, right? Like the frustration, and I know you want to have balance, obviously, but the frustration I think a lot of Texas folks have, and a lot of folks that just watch Texas on a weekly basis like we do have, is that at times – Steve Sarkisian gets too cute with the play calling. Like, it's working. You're gashing them. They have no answer. And for whatever reason, you inexplicably go away from it. That happened in this football game. It didn't cost Texas. I would argue it made the game much closer than it needed to be. Cole, this felt like almost every other game Texas has played this season outside of the matchups against Georgia. Like, have we not seen Texas play this game over and over and over again this season where they get up big, they kind of get cutesy, and they let the other team back in, but they still find a way to secure the W. And, of course, I'm taking nothing away from this performance, but it felt like this is kind of what Texas has been doing all season, but give them credit, they've handled their business. But, again, the running game, Cole, that was the story of this football game. Trey Wisner, Jaden Blue, Quinn Ewers every now and then using his legs, Arch Manning coming in doing some things, but that running game was the story of this football game.
Jared Gibson, don't forget about him either. You're having 6.1 yards per play. That's impossible to stop. And here's the thing. Clemson has not been the same Clemson of old. Like, when we talk about Clemson and what they were underneath Dabo back in the 2010s, they were great at wide receiver. They were always punching out future first-round talent. They also were really good at the defensive line. I mean, you look at guys like Cleveland Farrell, and you look at Dexter Lawrence, and you look at Christian Wilkins, and you say to yourself, That's the standard of Clemson football. This was the 78th ranked rushing defense going into this matchup. They were allowing over 192 yards per ground. Per yards per game on the ground. They were allowing an average of 4.1 yards inside the red zone. I mean, they allowed the most touchdown runs, I think, in Clemson history since the Dabo Swinney era started. Since the first year of the Dabo Swinney era. So, I mean, like, we're talking about this not being a great run defense for Clemson whatsoever. And Texas, when they decided to put an emphasis on its ground game, capitalized, took advantage, took them to the woodshed, bent them over, beat them to oblivion. I mean, again, it's such a generically bland answer, but sometimes being bland and boring keeps you not only employed, it advances you. How many times did you watch as there was a breakaway run because of great contact and vision from a guy like a Jarrett Gibson or from a Jaden Blue or from a Trey Wisner? That's something that you have to go and say that there's an testament for. And more importantly, there's a reason for a foundation moving forward that this is something that you can hold your hat on. This is a reason that your team can be successful when you play against Arizona State in 2 weeks. This is the reason why your team can be able to set up the passing attack when you play against Oregon or against Tennessee or against Ohio State or whoever that matchup is in the semifinals if you get past a team like Arizona State. But you got to be able to look at what this offense is. It has to be predicated on the run. When you utilize the run game, it makes the pass more easy. And what do we notice in the first half? As Texas was able to climb up to a significant 3-touchdown lead, the run opened up the pass. And then you saw Gunnar Helm in the end zone. And then you saw Matthew Golden connect on the deep shot fields. And then you saw as Silas Boulder made a couple of big-time plays. And then you saw the way that the passing attack when it came to DeAndre Moore was set on up. And then you watch this guys like Ryan Wingo stepped on up. The running game opens up the pass. And sometimes you may not want to hear that, Steve Sarkisian, but you're not going to find ways to be able to win in skull-drugging fashion against quality teams when you don't put an emphasis on what is your bread and butter. I know that you don't have an elite running back, but you got a ton of dudes that are able to utilize their legs and create second opportunities that are going to make your offense more dynamic.
Cole, Steve Sarkisian reminds me of the guy, and I've been in this position where you're playing EA College Football 25, and even when you're gashing them, you just so badly you want to hit the deep shot, you want to throw the ball. It's more fun. It's more flashy. He gets bored. He gets bored with it. It's like it's too easy. It's too simple. Like I really want to pitch and catch it and throw it around. Because to your point, the moment they go back to it, Clemson didn't have an answer for that outside zone all night long, and they go right back to it. Boom, big touchdown, which essentially, solidified the game, put the ball game away. But, I heard a lot of people, Cole, talking about when they went in the game against Georgia, they felt like Texas's offensive line was really going to take it personally, the way they performed in the first time they faced off against the Dogs. I think the performance a lot of Texas folks were expecting in that SEC championship, it kind of came to fruit in this game. Like, I thought Texas's offensive line, it seemed like they played with a mean streak, played with an edge. They imposed their will. I mean, when they ran the football and, again, committed to it, you had two backs go over 100 yards, Wisner for 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, Blue with 146, 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was as dominating a performance as you can get. And then you go to Quinn Ewers, Cole. And I'll say this. I've been critical of Quinn. You've been critical of Quinn. A lot of folks at Texas fans, nobody's been more critical of Quinn. It's a shame because that ball that was deflected, that was intercepted, it goes on his stat line, and it's not fair. People are going to find a way to blame Quinn Ewers for that. Wasn't his fault. Ball hit the guy right in the hands. I won't say he played perfect, but I thought tonight was actually a pretty encouraging sign. Like we saw Quinn Ewers take some shots down the field and connect, and Texas's wide receivers made some big plays. And, by the way, this is without Isaiah Bond still. So,
okay, I thought let's stop with that one because of it's the Matthew Golden show over here.
It's the Matthew Golden show. No, it is. I'm just saying, though, I would be, as a Texas fan and watching Texas, I'm encouraged because it's like you get this running game going, and then you get Quinn taking these shots down the field, and, you have the balance in your offense, and Quinn's able to take the top off. It's going to make that Texas offense. We already knew they were dangerous, but they had been sputtering a little bit, right, over the last few weeks. I think that's what we more so expected to see from Texas on a week-in, week-out basis.
What I will say is that this is a solid performance from Quinn. He played good, not great. I'll take good.
He was efficient. He was efficient. That's it.
I will take good 10 times out of 10 if my defense is playing lights out. Here's the problem. This was a game where the defense didn't play lights out. They allowed too many second chance opportunities for Kate Clemson to go make this thing close in the second half. They allowed them to be able to capitalize, nearly be able to get into the end zone on that pick six. Those are things to where, okay, we got to figure things out before we let Quinn have to go ahead and decide the matchup. I'm not complaining, and I don't think anybody else should. That's the version of Quinn that we're going to get moving forward. If I'm a Texas fan, I'm content with it because of my ground game was efficient. I got 2 100-yard runners. I'm cool with him playing that way. If I get a couple of big-time shots moving downfield to DeAndre Moore, to Matthew Golden, I get back an Isaiah Bond, I'm content. Look at the way that you look at Gunnar Helm getting involved. What was the one thing that we talked about in the preview about this all week? Gunnar Helm has got to be efficient on third down. He led the team in receiving yards. So if I'm getting that version of Quinn Ewers, where maybe I'm going to get an interception, maybe I'm going to see some rush throws, maybe I'm going to see a pass that probably should have been caught but was dropped, and maybe it turns into a 4th down stop, I'm okay with it as long as my defense is getting the stops. The problem is that you looked at the defense today. That does give me some sense of doubt. Not a lot, but just a few cents of doubt depending on who I'm going up against. If I'm playing against a team like Oregon, I got to make sure that I'm on my P's and Q's. If I'm playing against a team like Ohio State, I got to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's. Depending on what version of Tennessee wants to show up offensively, that's going to be a big deciding factor. We'll find out more about this Tennessee team later on tonight because they've been just so predicated on the run game. I feel like that probably bodes well in favor of Texas defense. But you got to be able to make more of those critical stops, which may end up actually being a prominent sign for Clemson. And again, we're not going to talk positively about Clemson because this is an SEC channel, and we know that there are a lot of South Carolina fans that watch this show. But the fact is that Clemson did show some growth and maturity tonight, especially in the passing attack, to where if you are an ACC fan, there's a reason to believe that they should be a favorite going into 2025.
Yeah, admittedly, Cole, I mean, I was surprised by the style of this game. I expected a much lower scoring game. That was evidenced by me publicly saying that I thought under 51.5 was a lock. But I'm not worried about Texas's defense after this one. I know you just said we're not going to speak positively on Clemson, but man, I was impressed with Cade Klubnik. I mean, he played his ass off. I mean, he made some throws that was as good as Clemson's wide receivers have played in a really, really long time. I mean, they haven't been all that great since some of their big-time NFL guys, some guys you've covered, Cole, in the league, since they departed. And, I mean, to see guys like Moore on the outside, Antonio Williams made some plays, Wesco Jr. made some plays. Like, they got some young cats that can really ball out of the wide receiver position. But I'm not worried about Texas defensively. I do agree with you. You got to tighten some things up, especially. I mean, there's some reason for concern, I suppose, moving forward in the secondary. You don't feel as good about them tonight. But I tell you what you continue to feel good about, Cole, that defensive front.
Yeah.
I mean, you hold Clemson to 76 yards rushing. I mean, that was the reason Cade Klubnik had to throw for 336 and 3 touchdowns. They couldn't run the ball at all. And then, again, Texas, when they need a big stop, it was Texas A&M game all over again. When Clemson gets down there at the goal line, 3rd and goal, 4th and goal from the 1-yard line, inch line, whatever it is, and that front seven stands tall again. So when you got a front seven like that, again, they can bail you out. They can mask a lot of things. And, I know Texas's secondary wasn't perfect tonight, but I'm not panicking. I'm not overreacting. I really did, Cole, honestly watch that game, and I really felt like, man, you kind of just got to tip your cap to some of these throws Klubnik is making and some of these catches these Clemson receivers are putting together. Like, I thought they played really well, and, Texas will shore it up. But, elite can become a flood, but I don't think it will in Texas's case. I'm not too concerned.
Do you think that Garrett Riley called Colin Klein on that play call? I mean, my God.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this.
Make that call,
Garrett Riley, on the note of Garrett Riley, that opening drive was masterful. It was beautiful.
Surgical.
It was beautiful. And then, obviously you get off script and we saw what happened. But
why are
yeah,
you
to your
making
point,
that call?
I don't know how you watch, because I'm sure they had to watch some of the A&M film. I just don't know how you watch that and think that's a good idea. And especially, again, it was the same scenario. Like, not from the standpoint of obviously Clemson got in the end zone against Texas, but you would run for 76 yards. Why is that? And you're in the shotgun at the one. Like, but again, you give all the credit to Texas defensive front, man. We've talked about them all season. They're championship level. They're elite. Again, I know they were leaky in the secondary, but like we talk about a lot, Cole, styles make fights. This game, the style of this game, for whatever reason, just a higher scoring contest. I don't think this will become a trend. Obviously, you go play Arizona State and it continues, then maybe you start to worry. But I just don't see that happening with Texas. I think this unit, they truly are elite. I think we've been talking about them that way for a reason.
Here's the thing. People want to talk about, because of Clemson was saying that, oh, look at all these interference calls that we're getting against SEC officiating. You realize that these are refs that are not from the ACC or the SEC. So this was about as even keel as a game that has ever existed when it comes to officiating. Let me make this also clear. One of the biggest reasons why Texas was able to do what it did consistently was the margin of penalties. Chris, do you know how many they had in the entire game?
7 total, right, between the two teams?
They had 2 on Texas.
Two on Texas, yeah.
2 on Texas.
5 on Clemson, yeah.
They had 8 in the first half against Georgia 3 weeks ago. I mean, like, that's a night and day difference. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that, yes, there are some holding calls that are always going to be going against you, because that's just the case. If you don't like football, then just say that you don't like holding. Or let me phrase it. If you don't like holding calls, just say you don't like football. Because if there's at least 80% of the holding calls that are not called in this sport, that should be called. But that's never going to be the case. So move on with your life when it comes to that. They played a clean game. Like, they had a couple of turnovers. They had a couple of 4th down drives that you just are sitting here and wondering to yourself, why are you making those type of calls? Like Steve Sarkisian, why are you going for it on 4th and short? Like, those are some things that I can go tit for tat with. But still, when you play the version that you play tonight, and your offensive line is doing a great job keeping Quinn Ewers upright. He was sacked twice. There were 6 tackles for losses. You're able to create opportunities for your running backs to get to the 2nd and 3rd level of defense, and then your offensive line is blocking downfield and your wide receivers are blocking downfield. That's going to be a winning recipe. When your defense is able to make an offense one-dimensional, that is something that you can hold your hat on, that is sustainable, especially going into next week's matchup or 2 weeks matchups against Arizona State, because they love to feed the rock to Cam Skattebo. And if you can just slow down Cam Skattebo, it's going to bode well for you when you play in the Peach Bowl. It is, whether you want to admit it or not. It's going to be something that is going to help you out in so many different ways. I do have to give a lot of credit, though, to Cade Klubnik, and I do got to give a lot of credit to this Clemson offense, because there are some things that when you look at, there's hope and optimism. And I think that one of the things that we forget about all the time is that Clemson, we put such an emphasis on him to be the dude right away, the way that we did with DJ Uiagalelei. And he didn't hit year 1. And he learned the ins and outs of the offense in year 2 underneath Garrett Riley. And the wide receivers, they were all 4-star, really talented players. And you watched as they kind of developed into actual difference makers, which is why when we talk about SMU and Indiana and the recruiting rankings and the level of talent and the development, there's a reason we bring that up. Because if it wasn't just some Joe Schmoes that were showing up in the transfer portal down in Clemson, these were dudes that were highly sought after by Alabama and by Georgia and by Florida State and by Florida and by LSU and by other major programs, including Ohio State and USC and the programs that we hired as a pedestal, and Texas. And the fact that we saw the growth of an Antonio Williams and the TJ Moore and the Bryant Wesco, that's a reason to think that if you are a Clemson fan, we shouldn't have been here to begin with. Like, we got very lucky that we snuck our way in after losing to a South Carolina team that I understand. They probably would put up a better fight than SMU and definitely put up a better fight than Indiana in both those games, regardless of where the location was. But we got in. We showed some growth. There's some things that we get to work on in the offseason. I can appreciate that. From a Texas standpoint, you played 4 quarters of meaningful football. You gave your fans a way to go out on top. You won by double digits. There's not much more that you can be complaining about. You maybe want to see your defense play a little bit better on the explosive plays. You don't want to be called for the maybe some nitty-gritty kind of holding plays where it comes to the pass interference that weren't called. You want to play better against some wide receivers, but you're not going to be complaining that much. I think a lot of people not in Austin can be satisfied knowing that they got a win and they got a meaningful win.
You know, Cole, what's interesting is we finish up on this game. With Texas, it's we've seen what's happening against Georgia, but everybody not named Georgia. Like I feel like with Texas, there's one of two ways you can look at it. They are, when I watch them, they do the darndest things at times. Like they're just such a good football team that at times, and again, I guess that's college football in 2024, but they do things like the deflection that turns into a pick six. They do things like, just sometimes some of the throws Quinn Ewers makes, or just some of the blunders or mistakes they make. And there's one of two ways to look at it. It's like, man, maybe they're just a really flawed team and they keep letting these teams back in the games. But the other side of me, Cole, is like, this team is doing that and they're beating Clemson by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like this team can win a national championship. Like, they've got the pieces. Like, God forbid they ever play truly, and maybe nobody's really done this, but like if Texas ever played an A-plus game, I don't know if there's anybody in the country that could beat them on any given day.
No, Chris,
if they played their best game.
Chris, let me ask you straight up. If you took them A+ versus Oregon A+, do you think that it would be at least a 1-score battle, if not a win?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think even against Georgia. We don't have to go back to the SEC title. I was very complimentary for Georgia, but I mean, even against Georgia, like if you told me Texas played their very best, yeah, I'd probably take the Horns. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody that I would take. So
I mean, Texas played a B+, A- game for most of that afternoon in Atlanta, and they lost in overtime.
yeah,
I mean, like that's kind of what you got right now when it comes to a team like Texas. They have an offensive line that just can't find a way to get out of Glenn Schumann's path. They have a wide receiver core that's able to win with 100+ yards per game if they want to. They have a run game that once established, it's one of the most ferocious in college football. When they have a defense, it's one of the best in the sport, if not the best in the sport. They have rotational depth after depth after depth of the defensive line. And if this is the version of Quinn Ewers that you're getting, you can win. You can win with this. They are a very solid team. And this is where, again, I understand that people want to get so frustrated at the college football playoff because we're talking about, well, who were the main wins against? Who were your dominant victories against? Yeah, you're right. The wins have to mean something. The losses have to mean something. The way you look has got to mean something too. And the on-field execution of Texas, when they play at A- level, is a top 5 team in the sport. And they still, even when they got within 7, did you feel like Texas was going to find a way to blow it?
It always felt like to me that it was always just what margin Texas was going to win by, not if
that was the same. It was always a more so. All right, so it's within 7.
And in the moment they wanted to go back and control the game, boom, it's like one play gone. It just, go back to the run. There you go. We're done.
It's so funny. We were talking about it. We were just saying, hey, imagine if Steve Sarkisian stops getting cute with the play calling. Oh, look at that. It's an 89-yard run by Jaden Blue. He's off to the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. Like, that's Texas.
It feels like a lot of Texas is going to be controlled by, is Steve Sarkisian willing to run the football and not get cute with the play calling? And then how good does Quinn Ewers play? That's it. Because, again, I think Texas's defense is going to bounce back. You tip your cap to Cade Klubnik and those receivers. They made big plays. Cole, I will say I do think that Phil Maffa being limited, if not just completely limited, injured, they would have loved to have had him down there in that goal line spot. Not that it changes anything, but that was a big factor. He only had 2 carries for 9 yards. But, yeah, I mean, like we've said, and I feel the same after tonight, Cole. I think this team's ceiling is truly controlled by the play of Quinn Ewers. And I think after tonight, I'd even say more so the play calling of Steve Sarkisian. Like if they're playing Arizona State or down the stretch and they're running the football well, is he going to be willing to stick to it?
Here's some good news for all the Texas fans that are watching real quickly. We have over 1,000 people watching right now. So just make sure that you like the video, hit subscribe to the channel because we break down every single college football playoff game. We're breaking down every single SEC bowl game. So this is the place you want to be. Make sure that also you hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss any of this content. And it's free. You get to come back. You get to watch it whenever you want. It's also going to be an awesome experience because we do off-season content too. Steve Sarkisian has given the announcement on the players who were injured in this game. Trey Wisner was available to come back. They elected to hold him out for precautionary reasons. So that means that there is a very good shot that he plays in 2 weeks. Jake Majors was also able to come back in, but they held him out for precautionary reasons. Cam Williams is getting an MRI on his knee. That will be the one to monitor moving forward. But I do think you got to give a lot of credit to step up for the replacements on the offensive line. It felt like when they were running the football efficiently, there wasn't a missing beat, which again speaks major development to where Texas is in its SEC progress year 1, which is an area that I thought was a weakness all the time for an Oklahoma squad. People want to give me flack all year and saying, why are you thinking that Oklahoma is going to be worse than Texas? Because Texas went out, they brought in the right pieces to develop the offensive line and the right players to build an offensive line. They were a year ahead of Oklahoma in that standpoint. You notice that tonight against an ACC champion Clemson.
Saw somebody say, Cole, and I agree, you pass the score, you run to win. And when you can run the football the way Texas did tonight and the way they have at times this season, again, you see it pay off. A 14-point win over the Clemson Tigers. A really impressive showing by Steve Sarkisian's squad. Again, they will get the Arizona State Sun Devils in the quarterfinals in, about 2 weeks or so.
That's January 1st.
January the 1st. Yeah,
January
New Year's Day. So, again, like Cole said, we'll have a full breakdown of that. Talk about that game. But, again, tonight, Texas, big winners, 14-point win over the Clemson Tigers. Let us know your thoughts. How do you feel about Texas and their chances at a national title after tonight's big win over Clemson? Guys, that's going to do all for us. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast where we get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media channels as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. For Cole Thompson, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we will catch you on the other side.